Hello and welcome to another episode of Defense PR. In the last episode, we have Dr. Sudhir Sukija, who spoke to us about various aspects of defense PR. In our second episode, we will touch on more interesting aspects. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sukija.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Let's start talking about how does the military view the media on reporting on military matters?
Well, over a period of time, the military feels that the media does not understand the various intricacies of national security. It also feels that perhaps there is a need for better interaction with the media, so that the viewpoint of the Ministry of Defence or the three services is possibly projected in more meaningful manner, a more effective manner, safeguarding the national security though.
Probably also media organizations and journalists also need to work on a little bit of more research, understanding the situation on the ground.
Oh, definitely yes, that need is there, especially so because unlike many other subjects, the intricacies of the military are not so much well known. They are not taught, say, at the school level, the college level. Therefore, reading of books, surfing the net, speaking to people who are knowledgeable about matters military forms the basis of such knowledge.
Yeah. What would you think are the challenges that a defense correspondent faces?
Well, acquiring that wide base of knowledge of matters military takes a long time. I am not just speaking of the basics, the ranks, the structures, etc. That, though essential, is much more simpler. But the various intricacies of doctrines, for example, which any nation follows, is slightly an intricate sort of a study and requires time to understand. So, that is one part of the challenge. The second part of the challenge is to develop trust with the people whom they interact with. More often than not, they are officers from the services or senior officers from the information service. While these officers have been brought up in a system of being secretive, it is essential that a correspondent is able to take out from them information which makes a good story. So, that building of trust also takes time. It definitely involves keeping in constant touch with these people, these officers, officials, and also carrying some stories which may not really be of very saleable variety, so that that little give and take which is required is established, and then of course, carrying it forward from there.
And they can keep that contacts for a lifetime if they are good at building relationships.
Yes, of course, as they say, you meet a person for a reason, a season or a lifetime. If they are able to do this beyond a reason to at least a season, if not a lifetime, would be a wonderful thing.
Dr. Sukija, what about the physical challenges? Like for example, a correspondent who goes to Siachen.
Very interesting question there. I will tell you an anecdote. The piece to camera is an essential part of the television reporting. Those 15 to 20 seconds of fame that the correspondent gets. When you go to Siachen, you land up at the base, Siachen base, and from there the smaller helicopters, very limited capacity, take one or two correspondents to the higher posts over there. Due to technical requirements, the helicopter's rotors cannot be put off. So, you land at a post, the noise created by the rotors is there, the wind chill effect that is very cold, the breeze is also there.
Yeah.
So, you land there, the correspondent is shown, okay, this is the Indian side, this is the Pakistani side. So, he takes a little time to orientate himself.
Yeah.
He is physically in that state of extreme temperature, and then he has got to do his piece to camera.
Sure.
He loves to have something good behind him, a helicopter, a Jawan or the Pakistani side, and he has got to do all this within a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, that is a great challenge. Therefore, this guy has got to be a person who can think while on his feet.
Yeah.
He should be able to relate the particular event happening there and then give out. So, that requires great communication skills. Of course, the knowledge base is always something which cannot be separated.
Sure.
And also he should be able to very quickly understand the situation and relate to it.
Sure.
So, these are the qualities which are there. It is important that he is mentally and physically robust. That I feel is the essence there.
Yeah. What are the lessons that we could learn from the Kargil conflict, the coverage of the Kargil conflict?
If you recall, for the first 2 weeks or so, when the conflict was first detected and reported, for the first few weeks, no correspondents were permitted in that region. Some of them, the more enterprising ones, sneaked through though. And during this period, some stories emerged, some were right, some were fiction, or at least part of them was fiction. But later, when this entire process was streamlined, including the daily briefings in Delhi, it became a more meaningful exercise. At that time, if you recall, the entire war came, so to say, to your sitting room, thanks mainly to the television. It was during this period that, thanks to the entire media, television, print and the others, that the nation's effort became synchronized, and the smaller differences that which are usually there, they were not there at that particular time. Thanks to media, it paid off very well,
Yeah.
and the national effort got synergized, so to say.
Yeah. What would you say are the real challenges of defense PR?
There are many challenges of a defense PR. The first thing is, how do we maintain security?
Yeah.
The media always wants news. The more saucier, the better. Then these stories which are called exclusives, you always want to see that the story that is going out does not have security implications. This is a difficult task, because if you go by the rule book, almost everything is secret.
Yeah.
So, what do you speak and what do you not speak? The second aspect which is generally discussed is off the record. I must say there is nothing off the record with a journalist. You either tell him or do not tell him. If you do not tell him, fiction gets published or telecast.
True.
If you tell him, you are in a catch-22 situation.
Yeah.
So, that is a great challenge. Also then, you got to be extremely timely with the technological developments that we have. Today, news is telecast or broadcast or comes in the paper within a few hours of its happening. It was not so earlier. If you recall, when Edmund Hillary went up the Everest, there is a huge cash prize which was announced for the first picture, and the first picture came after many days. But when his son replicated the same thing, the pictures came in a few minutes. So, technological developments are there. The armed forces, as opposed to this, have a system of channels. So, every event, every news goes through its channels. This does not keep pace with the needs of the modern day media.
Okay. If the media reports a defense scandal, does it affect the morale of the defense forces?
Oh yeah, it affects both ways, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively. Let me explain.
Yeah.
Let us say the officers of the army, air force or navy are involved in quote unquote a scandal. It could be of various type, morals, money,
Yeah.
the 3 W's, wine, woman, etc., wealth. That time the soldier does think, how can my bosses whom I trust, I obey without questioning, how are they involved? That does affect the morale.
Yeah.
To an extent only, because he also looks up to his immediate bosses which are at the battalion level or equivalent level. The morale is generally preserved at that level.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, many times they are very happy, the morale goes up in case such scandals, such issues are raised, which ultimately lead to improvements in the system. They may bring down the morale temporarily for a very short time, but otherwise they are happy, saying that look, this will lead to a better army or armed forces.
What do you think of embedded journalism? Do you think it is something that can work in India?
Embedded journalism, as we are aware, the other word which has come in is in-bed journalism, and the journalists do not like that word at all. It has worked very well for the NATO forces, we are all aware of it, especially for the Americans and the Britishers.
Yeah.
But after this embedding was over, the war was over, a lot of introspection has been done, especially by the journalists in US, whether it is ethically correct. It worked for them, but as I mentioned, this debate has happened. In the Indian context, it has not been tried out in the way we speak about, say, for the NATO forces. Whether it will work or not
Yeah.
will depend on the political and military situation at that time. It will depend whether we have long wars, which area the war is being fought. The correspondent will always want to know what is there in it, that is embedding, what is there in it for me, how does it benefit me. Will I be seen as somebody speaking for the military and hence losing my independence?
And credibility.
And of course, definitely yes, sir. Very importantly, his credibility. Where is credibility? Because wars may get over, but his profession is going to continue.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, it will be depending on these issues. It will not work definitely in internal conflicts, where movement is easy, where you can get a lodging, a boarding without the support of the military. You do not require any transport, you do not require any communication support to file your stories.
Yeah.
So, it will definitely not work there, but yes, it could be tried out if and when we have the next major conflict.
Yeah. What about vernacular journalists? You know, how do they get into defense reporting, and how do you deal with them?
I will tell you out of my own experience. I will tell you a few stories as to how it really functions.
Yeah.
In Delhi, we have small bureaus of various language media. They could be of the television, they could be of the print media. While they are interested in the national stories, but they are more interested in the political stories which are happening, which affect their respective states.
Yeah.
They come into the picture more so when some person, a soldier, an airman or an officer, etc., who belongs to their state is involved. For example, the Bengal based vernacular, or should I say language media, they had a sort of a big story happening when there is a particular act of beating up of the police persons there by certain army men. It was a big story. They tried out in Calcutta that somebody would speak to them. It did not happen. So, they came over to us and we had to shoot. Let me tell you, the entire day. When I got back home, there were calls, and then I shot, gave out the army's perspective to them in a small park which was opposite my own home. So, that is one part of it. I will give you another instance. We have a martyr, let us say, from Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, or any other state. Now, they are interested to know as to what happened, because this is a story which touches their heart.
And a powerful human interest story.
Absolutely, a very powerful human interest story. That story is very important to say somebody in Udupi, somebody in Mangalore.
That's right.
Somebody in a remote this thing, they get it from Delhi. But this would be just mentioning these two incidents would not be the complete answer to your question. We are all aware the year on year growth of the language papers, language television channels is really very high. They are mushrooming, so to say, and collectively their reach is much more than say English or Hindi media. Our nation is in various states, they speak the local language. So, they are extremely important. English and Hindi media is important for the opinion makers, but for the masses it is a language media which needs to be focused.
You have underlined the importance of both conflict journalism and defense journalism. Don't you think that our education system should introduce this at both the undergraduate and the postgraduate level?
There is no denying the fact that this is very essential. I would say that some aspects of the how the militaries function, the very basics could be at the school level. But answering specifically your question of the college level, it is required, especially for those who want to pursue journalism as their career. Unless you know the basics, how do you progress to be a defense correspondent? Conflict reporting is a step even more specialized, much more specialized. Both are required, and with experience, basic learning and the experience will pay them good. I would like to make a point over here. It is my personal experience that we have very few defense correspondents who are knowledgeable about matters military. We are the second largest army, and just a handful, trust me, just a handful of people who understand the military. The scope is vast if one is passionate about it, and that is the underlying this thing. And of course, I would like to say that they say Steve Jobs, I will quote him, when he was addressing Stanford students, he spoke of the stories of his life, and towards the end he said, stay hungry, stay foolish, stay hungry for knowledge, and keep telling yourself, look, I am foolish. Foolish in the sense that I do not know it all. That is very important in all professions and also in defense.
One has to be a student all through life,
Surely.
especially in journalism.
I personally feel it is a pleasure to be a student all through one's life.
Every day you open the newspaper or the magazine or you switch on the television, you realize how ignorant you are, because there is so much to understand and learn.
Yes, of course. I would also add there, it is important to have a childlike curiosity,
Yeah.
and that is a process of learning.
Yeah. What do you think is the role of photojournalism in sending the message to the masses as far as defense PR goes?
There are so many pictures of conflict that we have seen, especially one of that little child in Vietnam, a girl who was wearing no clothes,
Yeah.
napalm attack, running after that. That sent such a message back home to the US
Yeah.
that it turned the tide of the war, the decisions taken for that war. A picture, as they say, speaks 100 words or 1,000 words.
Yeah.
A video speaks 1,000,000 words.
Yeah.
A good picture with a sensible caption does the trick. You do not require a story after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It touches people's sentiments,
Yeah.
and that is the bottom line of good journalism.
What are the precautions that a defense correspondent should take?
Well, by the very nature, any correspondent is very inquisitive. He wants to have something exclusive. But when functioning with the defense forces, especially in conflicts, certain precautions need to be taken. I would say that the general guidelines which have been laid down for the journalists should be followed. Let me explain this. In battle zones, certain areas may be mined, that is, anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines, etc. are there. So, he has got to be extremely careful where he is moving on the ground. Due to reasons of security, certain lines are drawn that you do not go ahead of this. This primarily because if you go ahead of that particular line, you could draw enemy's fire. So, the physical security part will get compromised. So, he has got to be careful on that. Suppose is conflict, suppose is covering conflict internally, there is, say, an encounter happening between the military and the terrorist. So, the correspondent who is covering it, it is essential that he wears a bulletproof jacket and something to cover his head. It is called a patka. So, he covers his head and has a good bulletproof jacket also. Very often they are advised to write press on this, so that the militants or the terrorists do not mistake them to be somebody from the military. The very basic thing, of course, is suppose they are going to difficult areas, they should ensure that they are in good health. Anybody, say, with a heart problem or with a blood pressure issue going to those areas, because the medical facilities there may not be as advanced as in a big town. They have those basic facilities, but they should be very careful in that too. Also important is that use of their cameras, etc., which give out flashes, etc., at night. If they use them at night, it gives away the position to the opposing forces, and they could lead to very serious consequences. Also, it is in very good form to recheck whether that report which they are filing will give away certain positions, etc., of our own forces, which may be a security lapse. So, these precautions could be taken by a journalist.
What about food? They could carry chocolates and dry fruits.
Yes, what I would say that as it happened in Kargil, there was one hotel, just one hotel in the entire town of Kargil, and everybody was piling on to that. So, in such situations, some ready to cook foods like, say, noodles, I won't name the brand, which could be cooked in a jiffy, some chocolates, some dry fruits should form a part of your backpack. And it would not be wise to bank on the local forces there, because they will be more engaged in war rather than feeding anybody beyond their own people.
Sir, we discussed quite a lot today, but is there anything that you would like to talk about which we have not covered?
Well, I would say that this particular field of defense correspondence or conflict reporting is one field in which we do not have many people today.
Yeah.
You have so many people reporting on different beats. In this we do not have. There is an actual dearth of good defense correspondents. I feel that the younger generation who are passionate about their nation, of seeing the country, seeing the world and braving it all, so to say, need to join this profession.
Yeah.
It is a tough job. It is a really tough job. But if Kargil is something that we have got to learn from, many of those in the media today came up during that period.
Yeah.
They are household names today.
Yeah.
I am not wishing that we have one more conflict,
Yeah.
but definitely this is a field which is extremely satisfying.
But conflict would be there all the time.
Oh, of course, that is the only thing which has remained
Yeah.
from times of Mahabharata to now.
Yeah.
Conflict will always remain.
Right.
And if conflict always remains, they have a job which will always be there. So, it is a very secure job. There will be conflicts. Since there will be conflicts, there will be a job and an enjoyable job, a job in which you will say, oh, today is a new day. Everything keeps changing.
Thank you, Dr. Sakuja. We have had a very interesting interview today and we have covered a huge area in defense PR. I am sure you have inspired a lot of students to take up conflict reporting and defense journalism.
Certainly, there are a number of students, young men and women there who are very passionate about what they do, and if I helped in any small measure, indeed it is my honor and pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. That is all we have for you today. We will be back with another episode which deals with other interesting aspects, but on behalf of all of you, I thank Dr. Sakuja for taking out time to talk to us. Thank you and goodbye.